Hey guys, so before we get into the video, I just want to quickly clear something up. I'm asked from time to time why my upload schedule is so irregular. Why is it that sometimes I won't upload a video for weeks and other times I'll upload a few videos over a course of days? Well, the basic answer to that is that I make content when I truly feel like making content. I could force myself to make content at some kind of regular interval, but the quality would be lower. My best content is made when I truly feel like making it. And since feelings don't appear at some kind of regular interval, neither do Ask Yourself videos. So that's the answer. Now, having said that, let's get into today's thing that I'm feeling something about, which is the self-proclaimed far-left extremist Vaush and his take on veganism. Now, when I debated Vaush, I got him to affirm that if the animals who are currently being holocausted are replaced by the LGBT community, that it's perfectly ethical to fund the LGBT Holocaust by purchasing the products that result from it, such as the liver of a gay person, the breasts of a lesbian, the steak of a trans person, etc. Now, obviously, most people are going to hear that, and if they don't think I'm just strawmanning Vaush, which I'm not, that is his position, just go watch our discussion, they're going to say, well, look, that's completely fucking insane. I don't agree with that, and they're just going to leave it there. But there is a contingent of people who are actually tripped out by Vaush's position here, and it's because he provides some further reasoning, which basically aims to equate all purchases under capitalism and then say, if one is wrong, all are wrong. It's not the case that all are wrong, so it's not the case that one is wrong. Now, I've actually formalized his argument. I've gotten him to sign off on it, and I've formalized a counter-argument which falsifies a premise of his argument, thereby rendering it unsound. Now, at this point, my audience is pretty accustomed to seeing formal logic in videos, but I don't think that Vaush's audience is, and I'm sure a lot of them are going to see this video, and I want them to be able to precisely track what's being said here. So I'm just going to take a moment to quickly explain what validity and soundness are, and why, if my argument is sound, Vaush's argument is unsound. So validity and soundness are properties of arguments. An argument is valid if and only if it's impossible for the premises to be true and the conclusion false. There's mathematical ways that we can demonstrate validity. An argument is sound if and only if it is both valid and all of the premises are true. Now, if we look at the structure of Vaush's argument and my counter-argument, we'll be able to see why it's the case that if my counter-argument is sound, it's not the case that Vaush's argument is sound. So, Vaush's argument has the structure P implies Q, not Q, therefore not P. My counter-argument has the structure R implies P, S implies not Q, R, S, therefore P, and not Q. Now, if we look at Vaush's premise 1, it's a conditional statement, P implies Q. If we bring up the truth table for a conditional statement, we can see that the conditional is false in the case that the antecedent, that's the first letter, P, is true, and the consequent, that's the second letter, Q, is false. If we look at the conclusion of my argument, it is precisely that instance. It says P is true and Q is false. So if my conclusion is true, then Vaush's premise 1 is false. If Vaush's premise 1 is false, then his argument falls short of the criteria for soundness. It's still valid, but it's not the case that all of the premises are true, so it's not the case that the argument is sound. Now that we understand what my counter-argument is aiming to do, let's explore the actual content of Vaush's argument and, of course, of my counter-argument. So here we go. Starting with Vaush's argument, and for the record, this is a formalization that Vaush personally has agreed with. He thinks that this is an accurate representation of his argument. We have premise 1, if we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism, then we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism. Premise 2, it's not the case that we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism. Conclusion, therefore, it's not the case that we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism. So this is my counter-argument, premise 1. If avoiding meat produced through capitalism sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism. Premise 2. If avoiding all commodities produced through capitalism doesn't sufficiently maximize well-being, then it's not the case that we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism. Premise 3. Avoiding meat produced through capitalism sufficiently maximizes well-being. Premise 4, avoiding all commodities produced through capitalism doesn't sufficiently maximize well-being. Conclusion, therefore, we oughtn't buy meat produced through capitalism, and it's not the case that we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism. Now, it's worth noting that this argument assumes rural utilitarianism is true, right? Someone who's a deontologist might just reject the first two premises. So keep in mind, this argument is tailored to Vaush, right? It's not an argument that's supposed to be universal. People with different moral frames will reject premises here. This is just a reply to Vaush. This assumes his normative theory, which is rural utilitarianism. So let's go over why we would accept the premises. Premise 1 and premise 2 are just straightforward consequences of rural utilitarianism. If something sufficiently maximizes well-being, then we ought do it. It's just straightforward. So to get away from premise 1 and 2, Vaush would have to completely change his normative ethics. Premise 3 can just be defended via name the trait between killing animals by hand versus killing animals by purchase. If Vaush were killing a quantity of animals by hand equivalent to the quantity that his diet kills by purchase, would he say that stopping this killing by hand would maximize well-being sufficiently that he ought do so? We already know that his answer to that question is yes. He's made it abundantly clear that he does not hold the kind of position that Destiny holds. He doesn't think it's okay to just go around and harm animals. Now, granting that his answer to that question would be yes, it would maximize well-being sufficiently that he ought not kill those animals by hand, the question becomes, why is it that that degree of well-being maximization requires action in one context but not the other? Premise 4 can just be defended by pointing out that it's actually entailed by premise 2 of Vaush's own argument. So when Vaush tells us as a rural utilitarian that it's not the case that we oughtn't buy any commodity produced through capitalism, that's his premise 2, we have to think about what does oughtn't mean to a rural utilitarian? Well, to a rural utilitarian, the things that we oughtn't do are the things that don't sufficiently maximize well-being. So his premise 2 actually entails that avoiding all commodities isn't something that sufficiently maximizes well-being. So there's my critique of Vaush. Of course, if he accepts that my premises are true, then he's committed to his P1 being false and therefore his argument being unsound. Obviously, I'm happy to talk to Vaush at any point. I don't think he's a bad actor. I don't think he's going to dodge a question 23 times in a row. I mean, we're not really friends. We're kind of acquaintances, but our interactions so far have been nothing but positive, so I have no reason to think that we wouldn't have a completely productive conversation. And if you want to know what I mean when I say he's not a bad actor, I don't think he's being malicious. In all honesty, what I think is going on in his head is veganism gives him some cognitive dissonance. He'd rather not think about it, and it's convenient to just throw a blob of leftist ideology at it and hope it sticks, which ironically really triggers the leftist vegans who hate seeing their ideas misused to justify supporting a Holocaust. So that's all for today. I'm happy to talk to Vaush at any time. Feel free to support via Patreon and Teespring. They're both linked down below. Till next time.